5 here on LBC. Ulster Unionist MP is speaking in the House of Commons at the moment, Tom Elliott. The debate is scheduled to finish at 10. There'll be 2 votes, one on an amendment and then the second one on the main motion. So we should know the result around 10:30, unless I am told that it could go on beyond 10, but I'm not quite sure what the rules are on that. Keep your calls coming, 0345 6060 973. Well, 2 eminent MPs have joined us, Stewart Hosie, Deputy Leader of the SNP, and David Davis, Conservative MP and former Shadow Home Secretary. David, let's start with you. You've spoken in the House of Commons today. I read on Twitter that you made an impressive speech, but I haven't got a clue what you said. Would you like to enlighten us?
In about 4 sentences.
Yeah.
One, that this is just symbolic. We won't make any difference. The Americans are only flying 7 missions a day because they haven't got any targets. So they're not short of aircraft, they're not short of weapons, so we will just displace 1 American bomber. That's the first thing. Second thing is, actually, the air campaign, its stated target is to degrade ISIS. Since it started, ISIS's recruitment has doubled, from 15,000 to 30,000. So they've got about 100,000 on the ground now. So it's not working.
It's not working in Syria or Iraq?
That's Syria I'm talking about.
Okay. But if it's working in Iraq, why can't it work in Syria?
Well, because there's nominally, on the payroll, there's 1 million security people in Syria, 350,000 army, 650,000 police. Half that for real numbers, but still it's 500,000. And they can spot targets. I mean, the reason you can't find any targets in Syria is there's nobody to find you the targets other than the Kurds. This 70,000 strong mythical army, frankly, phantom army, if it was any good at all, the very least you could do is say, look, there's a target over there. They can't even do that.
Normally we would have special forces that might be doing that, but do you think they're not operating in Syria?
I can't possibly comment.
Well, you could, but you probably
we would be guessing, wouldn't we?
Well, we would be guessing, but I mean, normally in these situations, you've got spotters who are pointing out targets, haven't they?
Yeah, but all right. Let me surmise. If you had special forces out there, I don't know how many, but they would find you maybe 3, 4, 5 a week. They're not supermen, and that's not enough. That's not what an army on the ground can do. You need 100,000 people on the ground.
So you're going to vote against tonight.
Yep.
How many of you will there be, do you think?
Tories? Oh, 10. Not very many. Not very many. I mean, a lot of people who voted against the government in 2013 have been swayed by the emotion of it, really. I mean, saying, look, we've got to do something to support our French colleagues. My argument is, yeah, we should do something. We should defeat ISIS, which means doing it properly, not messing around at the edges.
Do you think this vote would be being held today if Paris hadn't happened?
No, certainly wouldn't. It also probably wouldn't be being held today if the Labour Party had a 3-line whip on it. So, there are all sorts of might-have-beens, but it is being held. The government will win, and I think many people will look back at their speeches today in 2 years' time and think, was I right or was I wrong?
Which is what Jeremy Corbyn was saying, in effect, wasn't it?
Was that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what he finished his speech by saying.
I missed that. I wasn't paying attention.
I know. I saw you standing at the back with the naughty boys. Stewart Hosie, the SNP, you have a 3-line whip on this, do you?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not sure you'd need one, actually, would you?
No, I don't think we need one at all. There seems to be an absolute unanimity that this is the wrong conflict at the wrong time.
They have that in their DNA.
I have to say, I actually agree with David Davis that what we need to be doing is actually defeating Daesh. And 2 of the points David made in his speech, which he hasn't mentioned, was about the border between Turkey and Syria, and about following the money, also about supporting the Kurds in Syria, the Syrian Peshmerga. There are all sorts of things we could be doing, really sensible, practical things that are more than just a gesture. But of course, these aren't really on the agenda.
So why aren't we doing these things? I mean, the financial things, which again Jeremy Corbyn mentioned. I mean, maybe we are doing them, but nobody knows about
them.
I don't know.
They're tough. They involve arguing with our allies, telling the Turks, if you're going to be in NATO, you behave like a member of NATO. Shut the border, And also telling the Saudis...
It's quite a long border.
No, it's not anymore.
600 miles?
The Peshmerga hold a lot of it, and there are a few bottlenecks now. I mean, I promise you, it's not that hard. And the Saudis, just tell them, stop giving money to them. and if not, we're going to get very difficult with you. But not just us, the Americans, everybody.
But why are we so sort of anxious about the Saudis? Because I mean, I talk about this a lot on my programme about what we could do, sort of stop Saudi funding of extremist mosques in this country, for example. And people get very twitchy when you talk about things like that.
I don't think there's a nervousness about Saudi Arabia in particular. I think there's just a failure of will to tackle whoever happens to be funding particularly nasty people who pose a threat to us.
But why is there a failure of will?
Well, I'm not sure, because the question which the Prime Minister's failed to answer, and it's the one you've asked, is why they're taking the action which they are taking, why the airstrikes, a question which has not been answered, and all the more pertinent today, given Tory MPs who are backing this said it will make very little difference, and other Tory MPs who are opposing it said it will make no difference whatsoever. This is symbolic, it's almost gesture war, as someone rather crassly described, but until we get a clear answer on the efficacy of the bombing, it's a completely pointless exercise.
Do you remember back in the Blair government we used to talk a lot, or they used to talk a lot about joined up government? What you're both saying is that there is no joined up government on this, that it's just people are obsessed by airstrikes, and yet there are lots of other things that could be done maybe in addition.
We heard it today any number of times. We must do something. Well, must do something isn't good enough unless the government, and the Prime Minister in particular, spell out precisely what that something is, what the consequences are, and what plan you've got for exit and to deal with the consequence. We still don't have a post-conflict stabilisation and reconstruction plan that people like me could say, that's a good idea, let's buy into it.
The trouble is, because at the end of the day, it's your fault.
Most things are.
It's the media. I mean, the sort of policies which need to be done, shutting down the money supplies, shutting down the oil sales, are just completely invisible. There's no television picture for them. There's nothing particularly dramatic about them. Whereas launching aircraft, tornadoes with afterburners going, bombs being dropped, the video footage is all very, unfortunately, very sexy. It's sort of war porn. And I think, to a very large extent, governments are driven by that in this day and age.
I mean, it's an interesting point, isn't it? That sort of deviating from this for a second, it's a bit like why in America we would cover some big flood that killed 50 people. If it happened in Bangladesh, we wouldn't, because there aren't television cameras there. It's a sort of similar thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the real tragedy about this is that we're talking about real lives on the ground, perhaps a huge influx of more refugees, and all people will see is, as David said, the afterburners of a jet and a bit of footage from a plane with a laser targeted bomb on goodness knows what. That isn't good enough, and that's not the information the public need to determine whether the politicians are taking the right decisions or not.
Well, I'm loving this new Conservative SNP alliance that we've formed here tonight.
One other thing that worries me about it all is so much of the arguments made by the government are patently bogus. I mean, the 70,000 phantom army on the one hand, right to the other extent, our weapons are unique, right? This is based on a report back in 2011 after the Libyan war. They think nothing's happened in weapon technology in the last 4 years. The Americans have got 5 different sorts of low collateral damage weapon. They got several bombs, a low intensity missile, and so on. This is just not real argument. So what's behind this? And if people are putting up unreal arguments, what's the real argument?
Well, we're going to have the real argument over the next 90 minutes on the show. David Davis, Stewart Hosie, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's